Hey, I noticed you clicked on the video, so you might as well stay now. You see, if you didn't already know, you know like how people talk about the greatest comeback albums in rock history? Like there always seems to be a few names that always come up. Such as like Black Sabbath, Journey, Boston, like a whole bunch of stuff. But I feel like one album that deserves to be near the very top of that list is Permanent Vacation by Aerosmith. Released in 1987, this album didn't just revive a struggling band, it transformed Aerosmith from a fading 1970s hard rock act into one of the biggest bands on the planet, even though they kind of already were beforehand. They kind of just like accelerated that stardom, you know? It was also like the album that helped turn Survival into superstardom, or some shit like that. To understand why Permanent Vacation was such like a massive thing for everyone, you have to like understand why Aerosmith was like kind of like a shit show before. You know, like by the late 70s, the band was pretty much falling apart. Drug addiction, internal conflicts, and the departures of guitarist Joe Perry and guitarist Brad Whitford, they kind of like left the group's future in doubt. Their earlier albums have produced classics like Dream On, Sweet Emotion, and Walk This Way. But by the late 70s and early 80s, Aerosmith looked more like a cautionary tale than a legendary act. Even after Perry and Whitford returned, the band's 1985 album, Done With Mirrors, kind of like flopped and like wasn't as commercial and successful as the other albums they had released beforehand. Aerosmith had reunited, but they still hadn't truly returned to their possessive and manipulative form that captivated earlier audiences. However, soon something came in an unexpected lifeline. In 1986, Aerosmith had collaborated with Run DMC, a rap trio, on a remake of Walk This Way. The song became a cultural phenomenon where suddenly a new generation had discovered Aerosmith. MTV decided to embrace them, with their profile exploding. However, a hit collaboration is one thing. Delivering a great album, on the other hand, is another. The real challenge, though, was proving how they still had great music left in them, even after years of already making music, you know. That's where Permanent Vacation sort of came in and took its place. Instead of trying to recreate the raw sound of the 1970s, Aerosmith modernized their approach while keeping their identity intact. The album blended not only hard rock riffs, huge choruses, blues influences, but as well as glossy 1980s production. More importantly, the album helped deliver songs that audiences just couldn't ignore, with tracks such as Dude, Looks Like a Lady, Angel, and Ragdoll. With these major hits becoming major hits and helping to induce the band to mainstream audiences. What made these songs work wasn't just radio-friendly production. They still sounded unmistakably like Aerosmith, of course, swaggering, energetic, but also larger than life. I would say that Permanent Vacation is a great comeback album because they mark a return to relevance. Permanent Vacation went much further than in other works. Firstly, it restored Aerosmith's credibility. Second, it introduced them to millions of younger fans. Not like humans, like actual ceiling fans. Get it? But anyway, it helped to introduce younger fans who hadn't experienced the band's 1970s peak. Thirdly, it set up an even bigger second act. Without Permanent Vacation, there is no Pump, there is no Get a Grip, there is even no decade-long run of arena-filling success that made Aerosmith one of the defining rock bands of the late 1980s and early 1990s. Many comeback albums survive careers. Permanent Vacation launched an entire new era for the band, not only just for themselves, but for an entire generation. Today, though, Permanent Vacation still is more than just a successful record. It's a story of redemption. A band that many had written off overcame addiction, lineup turmoil, changing musical trends, and years of declining fortunes to create an album that reestablished them as rock stars. A few artists only get a second chance. However, even fewer turn that second chance into one of the biggest career revivals in music history. That's why Permanent Vacation isn't just a comeback album, it's one of the greatest comeback albums of possibly all time. More than 3 decades later, Permanent Vacation remains the moment Aerosmith stopped looking back at what they had been and started becoming what they would be remembered for.